Neo-medieval music is a modern popular music characterized by elements of medieval music and early music in general. Music styles within neo-medieval music vary from authentic performance interpretations of medieval music to crossover genres that blend medieval instruments, such as bagpipe, shawm and hurdy-gurdy, with electronic music and rock. In many cases, it is more or less overlapping with styles such as folk rock, electric folk and neofolk. Bands specializing in neo-medieval music are particularly plentiful in Germany, although the genre also enjoys some popularity in North America, the Czech Republic, the Netherlands, France, Great Britain, Italy and the Scandinavian countries. History. It is difficult to point to an exact beginning of neo-medieval music. One could argue that all medieval-sounding tunes written after the actual Middle Ages are in some way neo-medieval music. This definition would include music from as early as the Renaissance and onwards. Other examples of early neo-medievalism in music would also include a number of Romantic composers such as Niels W. Gade, Edward Grieg, and Felix Mendelssohn, as well as parts of the Carmina Burana by Carl Orff, and many movie soundtracks from the 20th century. However, as a popular music form, the birth of neo-medieval music is closely connected with the folk rock and roots music movement of the 1960s and 1970s. In many countries in Europe, musicians sought to find the cultural roots, reviving music that had largely died out as a result of centuries of industrialization and decades of exposure to United States music styles like jazz and rock. The founding of the German band Augenweide in 1970 is particularly important in this respect. Augenweide revived many distinctly German and European genres, such as the Minnesang, and other examples of courtly love poetry and music. It is interesting to compare Augenweide's approach to music with that of the contemporary krautrock bands, especially Kraftwerk. Both sought to recreate German culture which they felt had been compromised by Nazism and World War II. But whereas Kraftwerk took music creation to an entirely new level, Augenweide would revive ancient music and play types of instruments that, at least in Northern Europe, had been out of use for centuries. In Great Britain, too, prog rock bands like Jethro Tull would often write songs with a medieval touch to them. It was not until the late 1980s, however, that neo-medieval music would arise as an entire genre of its own, replete with a subculture following. The Australian outfit Dead Can Dance, who released most of the most famous works in the latter half of the 1980s, was another early influence on the scene. Dead Can Dance had a far more pompous and symphonic sound than previous acts, and, although never considering themselves to be a goth band, were mostly popular among goths. This formed the precedence of neo-medieval music being particularly popular in the goth scene. 1989 saw the formation of the German band Corvus Corax, two members of which were on the run from the disintegrating East German regime. Throughout the 1990s, Corvus Corax would go on to have a profound effect on the state of neo-medieval music. Corvus Corax, along with other bands, started the now immensely popular strategy of combining medieval music with electronic music. More recently, the band Extra Life has combined aspects of early music with the modern genre of math rock. Neo-medieval and neo-Renaissance qualities have also been featured in contemporary music composers like Mamoru Fujita and Michael Waller, with the use of modal cells and subtle counterpoint. Neo-medieval music by country. Neo-medieval music enjoys popularity in many countries. Germany is by far the most active country in the neo-medieval scene. Nowhere else in the world are the artists so plentiful and the styles of music so diverse. The country contains such acts as Ioculators, Corvus Corax, In Extremo, Saltatio Mortis, Faun, and more ambient-oriented bands like Helium Vola, Qntal, Love is Colder Than Death, Silds SANC in Estampi, to mention a few. A particularly popular lineup is a variation of a traditional pipe and drum band, consisting mainly of modified bagpipes and a davul drum, often backed up by shawms in a manner reminiscent of a Breton bagger. Sweden is home to the legendary folk rock band Heidelberger, whose music contains a fair share of medieval influences, not least in the choice of instruments. The songs often contain hurdy-gurdy, bagpipes and nyckelharpa. Whether the band is actually neo-medieval or not may be a matter of debate. One could argue that they are merely infatuated with everything ancient. They have even been known to use Danish Bronze Age lures, as well as playing gigs in castle ruins. However, their influence on the neo-medieval scene in Scandinavia is arguably enormous. Garmarna is another important Swedish band in this context, as well as the Dead Can Dance, Qntal-inspired Act Arcana. Denmark. Medieval music in Denmark, and to some extent the other Nordic countries as well, has almost always been synonymous with Nordic dancing ballads. This particular type of ballad depends on cooperation between the lead singer and his audience. The singer narrates a story in song, to which the audience dances and falls in at the repeated chorus line, which often predicts the end of the story. A song may last 20+ minutes. This tradition has been alive to the present day in the Faroe Islands, where it is entirely a cappella, though this does not necessarily mean that it did not include instruments in its heyday. In Denmark, the lyrics of most of the ballads, being always in the vernacular, were recorded by the landed nobility in the 16th century, and the melodies in the 19th and 20th centuries. Because of this vernacular ballad tradition, Danish and other Scandinavian neo-medieval music is almost devoid of the Latin lyrics of v.g. the German scene. Probably the best-known neo-medieval band in Denmark is Sortenmuld, whose songs are primarily interpretations of the above-mentioned dancing ballads, although the music does contain hints of medieval instruments like hurdy-gurdy and nyckelharpa. It relies heavily on trip-hop influences, and most of the medieval elements are downplayed in favor of synthesizer sounds, double bass, and filtered breakbeats. In recent years, other Danish bands playing in a more international medieval style have sprung up. These include GNY, Vili, Solverv, Asinger, and Valrauen. These bands may or may not integrate the ballad tradition in the largely instrumental music. Portugal is one of the older countries in the world. Situated in the Iberian Peninsula, it shares with Spain one of the biggest manuscripts found, the Cantigas de Santa Maria. The medieval culture is still very present nowadays. Almost every week there are reenactment festivals such as Vargem Medieval, the biggest medieval festival in Europe. The most famous medieval music band in Portugal is Strela. The band uses old Iberian instruments and plays medieval music from the old Europe. Hungary. The most famous medieval music band in Hungary is Anno Musica. Finland. In Finland, the rise of neo-medieval music has coincided that with history reenactment and interest in living history. The best-known Finnish neo-medieval band is Taru Jensari. On the other hand, Finland is fairly well known of its heavy metal bands, and many bands such as Turisas have adopted medieval-ish tunes and instruments, and Waltari has made also several neo-medieval-ish songs. Koistinen's electric cantel is widely employed on Finnish neo-medieval music. Latvia. The only one neo-medieval music band in Latvia is Obscurus Orbis, using wide variety of bagpipes and drums. They also uses hurdy-gurdy, shawms, bouzouki and Baltic national instrument kokol. Italy. The well-known band Atraxia from Italy has started creating music and live performances inspired by early music in the mid-80s. The most significant albums inspired by this genre are Historiae, Swenis and Cremastanera. Norway. Norway is famous for its thriving metal culture, and it is mainly within metal genres that neo-medieval music finds its outlet in a Norwegian context. Bands like Lumsk are known for incorporating medieval and folk elements into the music. More traditional folk-oriented bands like YM, Stammen and Gate also exist. Many Norwegian bands, metal or otherwise oriented, have a remarkable neo-pagan slant. Russia, as well as Belarus and Ukraine, share the common East Slavic musical tradition. It include bands like Melnitsa, The Darts, among others. Belarus Stereolsa is the best-known neo-medieval music band in Belarus. Mexico. In Mexico, the medieval recreation have some years, and there are bands like Arclon playing medieval neo-folk music with recreations of early instruments and sometimes use lyrics of medieval texts on their original songs. United Kingdom. Celtrabia, often described as a medieval rave band, play for dancing, featuring hurdy-gurdy and hammer dulcimer. The band play music from erect medievalism to tribal dervish mixmag, initiated by Quentin Budworth as an experiment into the fusion of pan-temporal and cultural elements to create a new, very different acoustic dance music. United States. Recently, a very young band from USA has been very active in the neo-medieval field. Formed in 2011, Children Medieval Band has been playing at several Renaissance fairs in California. In the same time, they have covered heavy industrial music and even got invited to open the concert for the German band Rammstein in Denver, Colorado. In April 2015, Children Medieval Band has released the first album, Treasure Underground, with 10 songs combining heavier rock with elements of medieval music. The CMB March song is the most representative by using a sussato melody and ending with a heavy riff. The members of Children Medieval Band are very young. Stefan, 13 years old, a multi-instrumentist who recently got videotaped playing the medieval piece Morantanz on 12 instruments. He is assisted by his two sisters, Olga on keyboards and Cornelia on drums.